In this video, I'm going to be answering the question that everybody has: is Luminar NEO better than Lightroom? Now, to do this as fair as possible, I'm going to be editing the exact same photos side by side with Luminar and Lightroom, using the exact same edits to see which photo comes out better, and then we'll reveal the results at the end. So this is the photo that we're going to be editing, and just to show you and making it 100% fair, I have not added any edits to this photo in the history. You can see that over in the right side of Lightroom, I have also not done anything, and in Luminar, I haven't edited this either. Exact same photo, and I wanted to make it as fair as possible by not having to do any cropping or anything else like that. I wanted to look at this just edit by edit, comparing side by side in this. So let's start off by just enhancing this with basic tools that I can do in each one. So for the exposure, I am gonna brighten this up again. So I'm gonna go to 0.36 on the exposure. I'm gonna go over to Lightroom, just type this in, 0.36 for the exposure, and so far, so good. Both photos look pretty similar here. Now let's get to some more edits. If we increase our contrast some to bring out more contrast in the bird itself, I'm gonna go up to 13 on contrast, and then over in Lightroom, I'll go up to contrast and type in 13 as well. So I don't see too much of a change in Lightroom, but I do see a little bit brighter of a bird in Luminar. So that's something to watch as we go through this video. Highlights, I'm gonna increase just a little bit in here, and then shadows, I'm going to decrease to emphasize that contrast in the photo. So for highlights, I did 7. Shadows, I did -18. I'll go over it in Lightroom and do the exact same edits. So for highlights, I did 7, and then shadows, I did -13. So there we go. Already, I see kind of more of a pop in the Luminar version of this photo, but we do need to complete these edits and continue doing. Next, let's work on our color. So for color, I'm going to increase my saturation to about 4, and I'm gonna increase my vibrance to about 10. And then for my tint, since this did turn it a little bit more green than I wanted it to, let's work with temperature and tint as well. So with tint, I'm going to increase up a few stops on the magenta, and I think temperature actually looks pretty good right there as well. So let's go over to Lightroom and make the exact same edits. So for saturation, I did 4, vibrance, I did 10. So let's come down to vibrance 10, saturation of 4, oops, not 45, 4. That looks much better. Now tint and temperature are a little bit different in Lightroom, so I'm just going to play this up the exact same way. So I increased it 3 steps up into magenta in Luminar, so I'm gonna do the same thing in Lightroom. So I'm just gonna go up 3 here, and let's just go back and forth. Again, I'm seeing a little bit brighter of a pop in the Luminar window than in Lightroom, but let's keep going and see how this works and plays out. I'm gonna come down here to Structure AI, and what Structure AI in Luminar is the same thing as Clarity is in Lightroom. They do the exact same things, and I'm gonna play around with this just a little bit. Now for Clarity, I'm just going to increase it to about 6 here to make a lot of these details in the bird's face really pop out. So we have 6 in Clarity, and so for Clarity here, I'm gonna increase it to 6, zoom in on the bird's face. We're at about the exact same point here. I'm gonna increase that zoom to about 300% so that we can see them side by side. And again, I am seeing a little bit brighter of a pop in the highlights using these same tools. Now, if you're watching along, you don't have Luminar, maybe you're interested in getting it or checking it out a little bit more, I do have a link down below that you can check out in the video description and the pinned comment. I'm not sponsored by Luminar, but that is an affiliate link that if you buy Luminar through, our channel does get a little bit of a kickback off of that to help us grow and make more videos like this. And I can already hear the haters saying that I'm biased towards Luminar. I'm not. I'm also an affiliate to Lightroom as well, so have that as you will. Now I think color on these is pretty spot on, and there are differences in color. Like in Luminar, you have color of HSL sliders, but in Lightroom, now that they've redone their system, they actually have a color dropper here. So I don't think it would be fair to compare those two tools since they are different now that Lightroom does not use HSL sliders. So let's move on to things that we can actually compare side by side numerically. Let's add a vignette here to bring more attention to the actual bird itself. So for a vignette, I'm gonna slide this down a pretty good amount to about -46. I can already tell this is going to be a major difference over in Lightroom because maybe their numbers are a little bit different, but just to show you what that would look like, if I scroll down to a vignette down here, and I went to a -46, that's what it would look like. So we have stark differences already showing up in Lightroom and Luminar with some of these values that we're seeing. Since this is a wildlife shot, I am going to increase the sharpness of this so that we can see it side by side with what that would look like over in Lightroom. So I'm going to scroll up right on the face here of the actual bird, and I'm going to increase the sharpness pretty significantly. So for the sharpen, we have 16, radius of 50, and a masking of 35. Let's just do the exact same thing over in Lightroom. So 16, 50, and 35. So if I come down here to the sharpen tool, so I'm going to go to 16, detail of 50, and a masking of 35 here. So there's our sharpen. If I can scroll around in this detail window to get right on the face here and even zoom in on the bird's face, I'm just going to go side by side and look at them and compare, and they look pretty similar here. So I think that's a very good sign that you're not going to get too many fluctuations in the sharpening. Now let's look at these two photos side by side and compare which one actually looks better. So let's go side by side here. This is Luminar, and if I go over to Lightroom, this is the Lightroom version. Now keep in mind, we did the exact same numerical edits to each photo, and they do look drastically different, specifically with the highlights and the vignette that we created. So if I go over into Luminar, you can see that the vignette is much softer and the highlights are a little bit brighter that are on the bird. If I go to Lightroom, the overall photo is a little bit darker, the vignette is stronger, and the highlights aren't as strong. Now, whether you want bright highlights or not, I tend to like the brighter highlights because the brighter highlights, the eye is drawn to a little bit more because your eye is always drawn to the brightest part of the photo. Now, the highlights and the shadows are slightly more balanced in Lightroom, but that's just something that I'm willing to give up in Luminar because of the more subtle differences and the brighter highlights that I'm able to manage with Luminar. Let's zoom in on the bird's face so that we can see what this actually looks like. I'm going to go to 300% on this one. So let's look at overall highlights versus shadows versus structure and clarity. So if I zoom in on the bird's face in Lightroom, we can look at those exact same things. So I'm getting more of a warmer temperature on those highlights in Lightroom versus in Luminar where it's a little bit brighter. And with the shadows specifically, they're both coming in at about the same tone of blue in there as well, with the background too, and the sharpening is just very sharp. Both did a great job in sharpening. So if I go back to Luminar, the color on this for me just looks way better than it does in Lightroom, and that's something that I've seen across the board using Luminar. Every photo that I've done side-by-side tests with, I've always liked the Luminar version a little bit better. If you want more comparison videos and Luminar tutorials, click or tap this card showing up on your screen right now.